Good day. Today, I want to share about this belief that in South Africa, we have more of a leadership problem than we do of insufficient policies and the works. So, if you think about it, it was in 1993 already when the Manufacturing Development Act came out. We have sustained the automotive sector for a long time in the country. The government has got strategic priority sectors in which it not only outlines priorities and targets, but avails huge amounts of money in order to help stimulate the growth of the economy. So it's not on the area of policy, nor is it on creating funding instruments where we have a challenge. I think our challenges are more microeconomic. If you look at the behavior of funding institutions, including government funding institutions, their operating models and how they structure financing deals is still first world, and it doesn't really stimulate entrepreneurship. I was at a conference recently where a guy was sharing how, for example, they tie their repayments on their loans on how a business succeeds from a sales point of view per month as opposed to a fixed amount of money. And when I looked at that and I said, why isn't it government that is having this approach? I mean, also when it comes to acknowledge things like pre-qualifying criteria for loans for businesses, they've got a fairly relaxed approach. It's still due, they still do their due diligence, but they test the viability of opportunities and place greater reliance on that than on things like, for example, the personal balance sheets of those that are applying for loans. Because truth is, in a country where half of the population is poor, you're not going to get a lot of people who've got great, brilliant business ideas, who have compelling asset bases with which they can leverage to get loans to do business. So we do need to change things. Government pumps a lot of money in SMME development all the time, but that money remains stuck in the system. You've got a lot of institutions like the NYDA that actually do give money to people, but what we need to do is to not assume that entrepreneurs fall from the sky. And I don't think we need to change necessarily our education more than we need to ensure that those who are retired engineers and who've got technical competencies go out in communities and train people to actually start their own businesses. This is the future. If you look at the US, many of the jobs, in fact, the majority of the jobs and exporting comes from small businesses, and small businesses accounts for a greater share of the GDP in the US than does big business. So it's time that we really build a capable developmental state, and this is not rhetorical. It's a genuine commitment to finding skills. The public service should not be a place to deploy politicians who've run out of power bases and no longer hold political offices. It's a space where you must find the best among us and employ them so that they can run businesses that are successful. If you look at the private sector, the same story. We need to have a private sector that is as committed to our national objectives as their Asian counterparts. Businesses in Asia follow national strategy with pride, and that's why you've got, for example, a lot of companies that come from Asia that have gone on to become globally exporting brands. Look at Sasol. It developed out of a culture that wanted to stimulate businesses almost on a nationalistic sense. We need to go back to doing that in South Africa, where we actually commit to the national project of making this country great again. And it's going to take all of us. It's not going to take government changing one policy or another. It takes us committing to actually make a rainbow nation count. It's not going to be made by anybody else. We need to create an inclusive economy in this country.